All right. Welcome back to WTF Menopause, everyone. I am here with Nancy. Thank you so much for joining me on this show today, Nancy.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to meet you and to be here.
Yeah, I'm so excited to talk about what you do with women in their stage of menopause. And just a little bit of a background, Nancy's a registered nurse. She's a mindset coach and a certified functional medicine practitioner. And a whole bunch of other things that we're going to talk about, it looks like, too. So we are going to jump into Nancy's history, personal experience with menopause, and just kind of go from there. And then we'll jump into what you actually, what you do for work to help women out. So what has been your experience with menopause?
Well, I feel like I'm through the last of it. And I turned 60 in April.
Okay.
And I would say my whole female career cycle-wise was uneventful. I never had any PMS. My cycles right out of the gate were very normal. There was no drama. I never knew what anyone was talking about when they were complaining. I got pregnant easily. I delivered. I mean, everything was smooth, so smooth. And then when I hit about, I think my periods they started to get irregular. And then I missed. And then and everything was fine. And then I started to get hot flashes. Bad. And since I work with natural products, I started a product called Estrovera, Metagenics, it's a Turkish rhubarb, and it stopped immediately. So I think I was about 55, and I think I was on that product for about 6 months. And then I just slowly kind of forgot to take them. And eventually I thought, well, maybe I don't need them anymore. So I stopped. And then I think it was when I was 58. So it was a couple years ago. Both my parents had passed away. It was just one of those years that just, you don't even feel like you're in your body. And after they passed, I noticed I was having a lot of low back aches. So I did what any natural person would do. I went to the chiropractor, got massage, all that. And nothing ever got better. The chiropractor would always say, oh, your hips are out of whack. And, I thought, yeah, right. I said kind of crooked anyway. And when it was July of 2018, I thought, I feel like I'm getting a bladder infection. So it was like, I went to the urgent care and they said, yes, you have blood in your urine, and just put me on some macrodentin. And they called me back the next day and they said, we cultured it and there's no bacteria.
Oh,
so
that's not a good sign.
Right. So follow up with your primary. And I thought, oh my gosh, being a natural medicine person, I tend not to go to the doctor, right? Unless I have to. And so I thought, oh my gosh, I was kind of scrambling to find, a primary. So I thought, okay, I might as well go, I haven't been in a while. And so he said, what's your symptoms? I said, backache. And, I got this blood in my urine and blah, blah, blah. So he said, when was the last time you had a pelvic? And I thought, well, So he did a pelvic and he immediately sent me for a transvaginal ultrasound, which showed I had a big honking fibroid. And I did a CAT scan and actually had a co-infection of a diverticulitis. And so I ended up having a miserable experience. And I think for me, and just my personal history of being someone who was, as a nurse, a rescuer, just not really focused on me. And I think a lot of women can relate to that, just not focused on me. So I ended up, the fibroid, it was benign, thank God. And it was, she said I was about 6 months pregnant with it. And I thought, well, that would make sense, the back pain. But, I never really had any symptoms other than that. So I had, with a specialist, what's it called? A procedure with the Da Vinci procedure. So it was laparoscopic.
Okay.
And because it was larger, it had pushed up into the renal tubule, kind of cramping off the tubes going into my kidney. So it was a little more complicated than that. And anyway, the surgery took about 5 hours because of the diverticulitis. Everything was glued
Oh
together. So
my
there's a lot of
gosh.
scar tissue, a lot of infection. And then naturally, a week afterwards, I ended up back in the ER with a post-op abscess. So I
Mm-hmm.
had to stay there with IV antibiotics and had to have a go into interventional radiology and put a drain in and walked around with a drain for about 10 days. And yeah, so for the girl who never had any bad experience, it kind of ended with on a an interesting twist.
Oh, for sure. That
Yeah,
was a very
yeah.
invasive and
hmm
crazy.
I wasn't planning that at all.
Well, I don't think we plan anything in
No,
menopause. We can't
no,
really. We think we
no.
can, or
And I
I
was
think,
super surprised that I even had a
yeah,
fibroid, I thought, because I
yeah,
had no symptoms.
right, right. Well, and that I mean, I've had plenty of bladder infections in my days. So just the
hmm
minute you said that, I just kind of went, ooh,
Right,
I just
right.
felt all of
Kind of
the,
clinched.
all the
Yeah.
feels.
All the feels of that. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
then to hear that you had something even more substantial,
hmm
that's kind of
Right. So the
scary.
last
And
year I've been healing scar tissue,
yeah,
which has been amazing. It's been just a really good lesson because, there's always a lesson.
oh,
So
for
it's
sure.
really, really gotten me into focusing, putting me first, which
Hmm.
has been a unique experience to say the
Yeah.
least for someone who never has. It's been really redefining what self-care is, what priorities are, what do I
Mm-hmm.
really want to do. So
Yeah.
I would say all in all, looking back, it was probably a good experience if there can be any.
Right. There was a
Yeah.
silver lining. The
Yeah.
silver lining is you realized you needed to take care of yourself.
Well, yeah, and even the surgeon, she said, I can't believe that you've been like walking around with that. And, I thought, my gosh, I am so externally focused, on my
Hmm.
clients, on my practice. And
Hmm.
it's like a big wake up call for me.
Yeah, yeah. And I think
So,
that is for a lot of women too in menopause, at least
hmm
from my experience from talking with other women who have been going through it or starting it. And they start to realize that, all this time they've been focused on family, they've been focused on career, they've been
hmm
focused on all
Oh,
of the
yeah.
things that they need to be doing, or their children or a spouse or whatever it is that we think we're supposed to be doing. And then all of a sudden, I think it's kind of a way in maybe not the best way, but it kind of makes us sit up and realize that we need to take care of ourselves. It's
hmm
like smacking us in the face saying,
Oh, yeah.
if you this is the time, take
Yeah.
care of yourself or you're going to be miserable. and
hmm
and we do try, and then the other side of it is the lack of conversation around this topic anyway in society, because for various reasons. But we really need to take this time for ourselves, and I think this is a great way
hmm
of it being put front and center and
Right.
making us and forcing us, because I don't think many of us as women would do that without that
No,
like
it's like
kick
a
in the back.
sledgehammer for me.
I think for so many of us, we really just
Uh-huh.
we just don't think about it, and we're so busy
Uh-uh.
that we just it
Yeah.
takes something dramatic for that.
Yeah. Well, that was my drama.
That's pretty dramatic.
hmm
So has what you've gone through, has that informed what you're doing now with your clients in your practice
Well,
now?
I'm much more sensitive to it, and I can kind of see the signs, when women aren't putting themselves first,
Mm-hmm.
can pick up on those cues. And so I really try to use my experience to say, okay, are you going to come now or are you going to come later? Are
Right.
you going to take the lesson or are you going to take the pain? Right. So you can be mindful and you can kind of pull your energy back and nurture yourself, where one day you're just going to be forced to, and it might not
Mhm.
be very pretty.
Right,
So
right. Yes,
mhm,
for sure. I mean, we live in a society where we push ourselves even outside of the whole being a woman thing, and taking that step back is
mhm.
so important. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about what you're doing now. You are a Rapid Transformational Therapy Practitioner, or
Mm-hmm.
RTT for short.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean exactly?
Well, that is a process developed by Marissa Peer, who is in London, England, and it's a hybrid therapy. So she combines regression hypnotherapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, and neurolinguistic programming.
Okay.
So it's getting to the core root reason people, for whatever reason. I use it for helping people with health issues, because there's always an emotional piece underlying a physical issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I might work with fibromyalgia, autoimmune illnesses, actually work with food addiction. I did a drug addiction a couple of days ago. Just women, and anyone. Actually, I worked with men and children for bedwetting, and teens with anxiety. So you can use it for anything. It's an amazing process to really get to the underlying reason, root, and core that people are experiencing whatever they don't want to be experiencing in their life. It goes usually back to something that happened in childhood, where they develop a subconscious belief. Something happened to them, around them. They pick up patterns and make meanings out of it. And then that can become the filters through which they process and experience their life.
That is so true. I was listening to someone talk about that, and well, not RTT, but just something similar along the veins of how we filter our lives through these things that happen in childhood.
Mm-hmm.
And something they said was really, really struck me was they talked about childhood trauma. And of course, a lot of times when we think of trauma, we think of the big things, like parent dying or
Mm-hmm.
abuse or something like that. But something as small as just not understanding what's happening in your world at that moment, that's very significant,
Mm-hmm.
because you are so small and you don't have this bigger understanding and this bigger picture of what's going on, and you have a very narrow worldview because you don't have that experience, can be very traumatic in a way that as an adult looking at it, we wouldn't see that as a trauma or as a potentially problematic thing. But because it's in that other perspective with the child, you're like totally out of control. You don't understand what's going on. Something scary to you can be very traumatic. And then, you don't even realize it because it's not something that doesn't
Right.
stand out like,
Right.
you
And
know?
children are pure emotion. They don't
Mm-hmm.
have a conscious mind, so they can't reject things. They can't go, oh no, that's silly.
Right.
They take it all in there like little sponges.
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell you how many regressions have gone back to kids being in school and being kind of like in front of the class and being embarrassed by the teacher. And I mean, yeah, it does sound silly, but when you're that little kid, no, it's like it's devastating.
Yeah.
And that becomes an unconscious program that runs underneath the surface
Mm-hmm.
and stops people from really living their best lives.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I just got goosebumps.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for real, because I can even say for myself, there have been times in my life where I have been trying to do something, and for some reason it's just been like I get right up to the line and then I pull back and I cannot figure it out. I rack my brain, and I feel like I'm a fairly self-aware person, but I still can't quite pinpoint what it is
Right.
that's holding me back from
Well,
that.
you'll never get it from the conscious mind. It's all underneath. It's like defragging
Right.
the hard drive of the computer.
Yeah.
We upgrade our phones. We defrag the hard drives, but we don't do that with our own belief systems.
Mm-hmm. That's really powerful. So how do you see that practice helping with women in menopause?
Well, a lot of women in menopause have underlying core beliefs, core wounds, I call core emotional wounds of I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I don't deserve it.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow all the distractions of marriage and children and everything has sort of pushed that under the surface.
Mm-hmm.
As they become empty nesters, it's kind of like they look around like, okay, wait, where did I go? Yeah.
Preaching to the choir over here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
So we
that's
get
really that must be very helpful because, like we were saying before, you have to pay attention to yourself now because not only is your body starting
Yeah.
to become a little more foreign to you, but your whole life is starting to change
Hmm.
dramatically.
Yeah. And I say you take yourself wherever you go. So you're pretty much confronted with your own self,
Whether you like it or
which
not.
can be kind of scary for people because the
Yeah.
distractions slowly go away. I know for me, like, working full time in the hospital, then caregiving for my parents. And as they passed away, my kids were grown up. So it's like no one kind of, quote, needed me anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, what do I fill this time with? Well, guess what? You have issues you've got to deal with yourself.
Right between here.
Hello. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
That's for sure. Now, do you practice the functional medicine and RTT
Hmm.
together, or
Yeah.
how does that work?
I've been combining hair analysis with
Okay.
RTT. In fact, I've done a couple webinars on that because I can do that virtually. You don't have to be in my office. I can do RTT over Zoom, and I can mail you a test kit for hair analysis that you can send right to the lab.
Mm,
And the reason I like the hair analysis, it's really the only test that looks at metabolic rate. So
okay.
you can be a slow oxidizer, which is like having a slow engine. You'll have a lot of weight gain, a lot of fatigue. Adrenals and thyroid aren't quite working, very sluggish. And in that case, you tend to bury a lot of toxicity. So it really tanks your energy because it poisons a lot of enzyme pathways. Or
Mm,
you can be a fast oxidizer, which is like an over revving engine, which can create a lot of anxiety, a lot of frantic feelings, hair loss, hyperactive thyroid, hyperadrenal glands, insomnia. So when we correct the metabolic rate, that really does a lot to kind of turn the ship around and get people going in the right direction. Plus, it
mm-hmm,
looks at what toxic metals you have on board. It tells us inflammatory patterns, the state of your digestion, how your nervous system is going. There's just a ton of things you can get. And it's a non-invasive hair biopsy. So it's pretty simple to do.
mm-hmm.
It gives us a ton of information.
And how does that? I mean, I certainly can hear some of the symptoms that you were talking about there with menopause. Now, does that mean that the hormonal changes that are going on, how do you use this analysis to then work with women that are dealing with all these,
Hormones.
wild
Well,
hormones going on?
I think I like to take people, but a lot of people want to jump right into bioidentical hormones or things like that. But I always try to reel them back into looking at creating a stable, strong foundation,
Mm-hmm.
meaning getting their digestion working, getting them breaking down their proteins, looking at food sensitivities if they're on acid blockers, which a lot of people are. Unfortunately, I try to wean them off of those.
Mm-hmm.
I look at blood sugar stability, getting them off a lot of carbs and simple sugars.
Yeah.
Checking liver and gallbladder because a lot of women have estrogen dominance. So I get their livers cleaned up. I get their gallbladders, adding bile in, um, addressing sleep issues, things like that. That all the hair analysis points to all those. So it really gives us a good blueprint.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of women like seeing where they're at. I know I had a lot of testing done and everything looked fine, although I didn't feel very fine. And then yet when I did a hair analysis, it just went to the core issue of what was going on. And it trends for emotional patterns as well, which is fascinating. The
How's that?
doctor I studied with showed me almost how to read a hair analysis like a psychic reading. You can actually see if people are in a emotional stuck pattern,
Really?
or if they have like I'll have super high calcium, and that means they've built a lot of defensive walls up. Um, Anxiety shows up. If you have copper toxicity, you'll have a lot of mood swing issues. So, yeah, and if you have really exhausted adrenal glands, you can have, oh my gosh, anything from like zero libido to no energy to you name it, right?
Oh
Because those are
yeah.
your spark plugs, right? So if you don't
Ex-
have spark plugs, you're not going anywhere.
That's a really good analogy.
Yeah.
So what You really kind of skipped a bunch or ran over a lot of, not
Yeah,
ran
sorry.
over, but not in a bad way. No, you covered a lot of, that's the better way to say it. You
Mm.
covered a lot of the questions that I had. So that's awesome. You were
Mm.
right on target. Um, so then the functional medicine, the RTT, and the hair analysis, they kind of all, it sounds like they all kind of weave
Hmm.
themselves together for you.
Well, and the reason for me, Tracy, is working in the hospital for so many years, we were so good. I worked with open hearts and other surgical cases. We're so good at putting people back together and sending them out the door in like record time. But like,
Mm-hmm.
there was so much that was never addressed. Like, why do people get sick? Like, what is the underlying
Mm-hmm.
kind of rhythm or dynamic that's going on sort of under the hood, if you will? And so I just kept searching and searching and searching, and just got a couple of different coaching degrees, and realized that we have human needs that a lot of times don't get met. And in fact, I mean, it sounds crazy, but people can get needs for being significant through illness.
Mm-hmm.
They can feel important through illness,
Mm-hmm.
and that goes way, way down deep. So I've just always been fascinated with nutrition and mindset and emotions and all that. So I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to, I was really good at just giving people a lot of good supplements, but I don't want people to live on supplements. RTT has got a beautiful thing called command cell therapy, which we can actually upregulate and downregulate a lot of detox pathways. We can actually program the mind to heal itself.
Mm-hmm.
So it's to create more neurotransmitters, to back down on neurotransmitters, to get digestion going. So it really is an all-encompassing um, therapy. But
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you do need a little bit of nutrition to jumpstart the system. So,
Yeah, I find that with my clients, they're trying to find that energy. They're trying to find, just themselves again. And really the first step is to get food in order, get the
mhm,
fuel running, so that they're
right.
feeling up and ready to do those things. Because when you're exhausted, the last thing when you go to the doctor and say, I am so tired, I can't hardly even keep my eyes open. They're like, well,
Mhm,
go exercise.
right,
Really?
right.
How is that going to help?
Yeah. Well, and you have to look at what tools are in their toolkit too. What do they have?
Right.
They're not going to
Yeah.
prescribe you amphetamines if you're tired,
Right.
you know?
Well, yeah. I mean, our traditional medical system. I mean, I am not in the medical profession, but just being a user of it and
Hmm.
having studied different aspects of the FDA and different things like that, I've always kind of been bucking the system. My poor primary doctor and I finally are seeing eye to eye, but it's taken us a few years to just kind of go back and forth about,
Hmm.
and not looking at treating just, why are we're designed to treat the symptom. We're not designed to treat the root
Right.
cause.
Right.
And there's so many other layers, like you said, and I've watched my own mother who has significant health problems. And I think a lot of it has to do with unresolved issues from when
Mhm.
I was a kid and things that happened back then. And I'm convinced that, holding on to different emotions can
Mhm.
really just set you into a really terrible physical health.
Totally.
And, it just, I think we're seeing the science on that now,
Hmm. Hmm.
and how that really can play into our physical well-being or lack of. And
Right.
I have witnessed other people who do the medical or the illness, because we are living in a very disconnected
Yeah. You
society in
get
a lot of
attention if
ways.
you're sick.
Yeah.
You totally
And
get attention.
people don't, that if they don't have good coping skills, this is how they
Mhm.
cope, you
Mhm.
know?
Mhm.
So there's so many layers to this.
Right. And it just fascinates me. So I'm really
For
happy
sure.
if my practice feels very complete.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, because I feel like I can offer a truly holistic service.
Mhm. Well, you have quite a lot of different pieces that you've put together
Mhm.
to make that
And I
happen.
think it, for me, it comes from, becoming 60, and it's a great place because we have so much hindsight. It's just an accumulation of what's worked, what hasn't worked, I
Mm-hmm.
do different, and just being able to reflect on that. And how would I want someone to work with me,
Mm.
you know?
Yep.
So,
You're truly the wise woman at
aw,
this stage,
I,
right?
well, I hope, I think, oh my gosh, in 10 years, it'll be even better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's amazing to me that, we fear this aging thing, but there's
Mhm.
so much benefit that comes from it,
Totally.
and we just need to own it and
You can
enjoy
get
it,
away with
embrace
so
it.
much more.
I know, I can't wait to dye my hair purple and just run around and have a good time.
Right? You don't need any excuses. It's just this crazy old lady.
That's right.
It's enough.
Well, I do have one last question that I ask
Yeah.
every one of my guests. And so, in your opinion, what are 3 small steps that we can take right now to
Mm,
help with our menopausal journey?
I'll say ditch the sugar. Maybe I'll give you
Yes.
more than three. Weightlifting
Okay.
is amazing because muscle burns, a lot more calories, and it gives you a sense of feeling really strong and powerful.
Mm-hmm.
I would say define what self-care is for you. And it's just so much more than manicures and pedicures. And
Exactly.
I would say get a dumpster. Make,
Declutter.
make a list of everything you're tolerating and get rid of that. So I say
Perfect.
dumpsters and bonfires are therapy.
Oh, for sure. For
Hmm.
sure.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I love it. Well, thank you so, so much for being on the podcast.
Oh, you're welcome.
Um, it's been a lot of fun, and I really enjoy your perspective here. So, if anybody wanted to follow up with you, how can they find you?
Oh, probably my name is my website, nancydespres.com.
So that's NANCYDESPRES.com.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll have that in the show notes as well.
Yep. Then I always offer a complimentary consult if people are wondering if we're a good fit.
Awesome. I'm I hope somebody takes you up on that because it sounds like you've got a lot to offer.
And we always
So,
have a lot of fun. That's one of my prerequisites.
good. That's mine too.
Fun.
I got to have fun, or what's the
Yeah.
point?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, everyone, thanks for being with us, and we will see you next week on WTF Menopause.